Keystones Unearthed. I'm August Vane. Tonight. A lost goat led him to 2,000 years of secrets. In the winter of 1947, a Bedouin shepherd named Muhammad Ethdib was tending goats in the rugged hills above the Dead Sea, near a stretch of desert called Qumran, on what is today the West Bank. One of his goats wandered off among the rocks. Climbing after it, he tossed a stone into a dark opening in the cliffside, expecting nothing in particular, and heard the distinct sound of ancient pottery shattering somewhere inside. Curiosity got the better of him. Inside the cave he found tall clay storage jars, several still sealed, containing scrolls of leather and papyrus, wrapped in linen cloth, undisturbed for close to 2,000 years. Word passed slowly through antiquities dealers in Bethlehem before reaching scholars. By the time archaeologists organized a formal search of the area, it was 1949, and the market for individual scroll fragments had already begun quietly. Over the following decade, teams of archaeologists and local Bedouin searchers systematically explored 11 separate caves in the cliffs near the original find, eventually recovering close to 900 distinct manuscripts. Those manuscripts survive today as more than 25,000 fragments, some no larger than a postage stamp, a handful nearly complete scrolls several meters long when carefully unrolled by conservators. Alongside the caves, archaeologist Roland de Vaux led excavations of a nearby settlement, uncovering a complex of rooms, cisterns for ritual bathing, and a long table some scholars interpreted as evidence of a scriptorium, a room where scrolls may have been copied by hand. Radiocarbon dating and paleographic analysis of the handwriting styles placed the scrolls between the 3rd century BC and the 1st century AD, making them, by a margin of roughly 1,000 years, the oldest surviving copies of large portions of the Hebrew Bible. Before this discovery, the oldest complete Hebrew Bible manuscript available to scholars was the Leningrad Codex, dated to around 1000 AD. The scrolls didn't just add detail. They pushed the entire physical record back by a full millennium in one discovery. Among the most significant finds is the Great Isaiah Scroll, a nearly complete copy of the Book of Isaiah, roughly 1,000 years older than any previously known Hebrew version, and remarkably close to the modern text still used today. Roughly 40% of the total find is biblical text, with fragments of every book of the Hebrew Bible represented except the Book of Esther. The remaining 60% is where things get genuinely unfamiliar. The community rule lays out, in detail, the daily discipline, ranks, and religious practice of the group believed to have lived at Qumran. The war scroll describes an apocalyptic future battle between the forces of light and the forces of darkness in vivid, structured military detail. One scroll stands apart from every other. Engraved not on parchment but on thin sheets of copper, the aptly named Copper Scroll lists 64 separate locations where gold, silver, and other valuables are said to be hidden. The locations in the Copper Scroll are described using landmarks that made perfect sense to whoever wrote it and are essentially unreadable to modern researchers. Not one of the 64 caches has ever been confirmed found, despite decades of searching. Who actually produced and hid the scrolls remains a genuinely open scholarly question. The traditional view identifies the Qumran community as the Essenes, a strict, ascetic Jewish sect described by the ancient historians Josephus, Philo, and Pliny the Elder. A significant competing theory, championed by scholars like Norman Gold, argues that at least some of the scrolls originated in Jerusalem's own libraries, smuggled out and hidden as Roman legions advanced during the Jewish revolt of 66 to 73 AD. That revolt ended with the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD, a catastrophic rupture in Jewish religious life. Protecting sacred texts from that destruction, wherever they originated, would have been an urgent and deeply serious act. The scrolls also became the center of a decades-long academic controversy that had nothing to do with archaeology. The original international team assigned to publish the texts kept access tightly restricted for decades, delaying full scholarly access into the 1990s. Public pressure, led in part by the Biblical Archaeology Review and a court case involving a reconstructed concordance, finally forced open, unrestricted access to photographs of every fragment in 1991, ending one of the longest-running access disputes in modern archaeology. Modern science has continued to extract new information from fragments first found 70 years ago. DNA analysis of the parchment itself has helped researchers match torn fragments back to their original animal skins, effectively reassembling scrolls torn apart across multiple caves. Multispectral imaging technology, originally developed for other scientific fields, has revealed faded or damaged ink completely invisible to the naked eye, recovering readable text from fragments long assumed to be blank. The scrolls are housed today primarily at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, inside a building called the Shrine of the Book, purpose-built with climate control systems designed specifically to preserve fragile 2,000-year-old parchment and papyrus. Not all 11 caves contributed equally to the find. Cave 4, discovered in 1952, alone produced more than 15,000 fragments, roughly 40% of the entire collection, making it by far the richest single source of material from the whole site. The Temple Scroll, one of the longest single scrolls recovered, describes an idealized version of the Jerusalem Temple that never actually existed as built, complete with detailed architectural instructions reflecting the community's own religious vision rather than a historical record. The scrolls also became entangled in genuine controversy beyond simple access delays. Scholar John Allegro, part of the original international publication team, publicly speculated in the 1960s about suppressed content threatening to Christianity, claims mainstream scholarship has consistently rejected for lack of evidence. More recently, in 2018, extensive scientific testing revealed that a set of previously unpublished Dead Sea Scroll fragments held by the Museum of the Bible in Washington were modern forgeries, reminder that the antiquities market surrounding the scrolls has never been entirely clean. The genuine scrolls, by contrast, have been authenticated through multiple independent methods: radiocarbon dating of the material itself, paleographic dating of the handwriting style, and cross-referencing against the archaeological layers of the caves where each was actually found. The Shrine of the Book, built specifically to house the scrolls in Jerusalem, was deliberately designed with a white domed roof meant to evoke the lids of the very clay storage jars the scrolls were originally found sealed inside. Beyond their religious significance, the scrolls fundamentally reshaped scholarly understanding of Second Temple Judaism, revealing a period far more diverse in belief and practice than the single unified tradition later religious texts sometimes implied. The scrolls also preserve something rarer than any single text: multiple, sometimes contradictory versions of the same biblical passages existing side by side, proof that Jewish scripture in this period wasn't yet a single, fixed, standardized document the way it would later become. Some of the sectarian texts describe a strict, calendar-based religious life built around a solar calendar of exactly 364 days, deliberately different from the lunar calendar used by the temple authorities in Jerusalem at the time, hinting at real theological conflict. Excavations at the Qumran settlement also uncovered an unusually large number of ritual immersion pools, called mikvot, far more than a small community would typically need for ordinary use, supporting theories of a group deeply focused on ritual purity. Today, roughly 70 years after the first discovery, digital imaging projects continue publishing higher-resolution scans of the fragments online, making material once accessible only to a handful of specialists available to researchers and the public worldwide. UNESCO added the Dead Sea Scrolls to its Memory of the World Register in 2009, formally recognizing them as documentary heritage of outstanding universal significance to all of humanity, not just of any single religious tradition. Small pieces of the puzzle are still being found. As recently as 2021, Israeli archaeologists announced new scroll fragments recovered from a previously unexplored cave in the Judean desert, the first such discovery in roughly 60 years. Their significance to biblical scholarship is hard to overstate, direct physical proof of just how carefully, and how accurately, ancient Jewish scribes preserved their sacred texts across more than 1,000 years of copying by hand. It's worth sitting with how this entire find began. Not an expedition, not a grant-funded excavation, but one shepherd, one lost goat, and one thrown stone that happened to strike exactly the right jar in exactly the right cave. Look at the evidence. Decide for yourself. I'm August Vane.